Hello, trumpet players. I want to talk to you in this video about what I call my business model. And this pretty much covers my lessons, all the books, all the compositions, and everything that I do to help you guys. So let's talk about it. So this story goes back to the 90s when I was teaching too much and I burned out. I had at the time when I quit, yes, and I did quit. I quit teaching when I reached 77 students. I actually had more than that at one point. And I was getting really burnt out. I remember how bad it was. I was having difficulty not falling asleep in the lessons. That was one thing. 77 lessons a week. Wow. Just talking about it now just freaks me out. Um, I also had difficulty with their names, even though I had a system where I was writing stuff down and keeping track of their lessons and their payments and their assignments and all that stuff. Um, yeah, it was hard to remember without going to their time slot in the schedule. Remember what their names were, and I was getting them mixed up. And so, yes, and if you can't remember their name, how are you going to remember what they were working on and stuff like that? So every lesson you had to sort of reacquaint yourself with the student. And there was a moment when there was a last straw where one of the students um, chewed me out. The student chewed me out because I had um, told him maybe I would bring uh, some D trumpet. He found himself a D trumpet. Maybe I would bring him some of my D trumpet music. And I forgot, which was kind of normal back then because I was just so busy. Um, and I forgot to bring that D trumpet music. And he chewed me out. He says, "You're you're slacking, right? You're you're not doing your job and stuff like that." And that was the last straw for a that kind of disrespect because I didn't bring him my music. And so I quit. I quit all of it. I quit. Um, I even quit at the time teaching at HSPVA. I used to be the advanced jazz improvisation instructor at HSPVA. Some of the people who went through that class are today some of the best jazz musicians in the world. Um, I don't name their names because, and that's sort of like what we're talking about now, the business model. My business model doesn't have to use my students for my own reputation. I don't mind that other people do that. I understand that's a done thing. Um, and I also don't mind if a student after the fact, let's say a student 10 years later says, "Hey, this was your lessons changed my life." Well, I don't mind that either. Um, but I won't take that. I don't need to take that. We're going to talk more about this stuff. But anyway, I quit HSPVA. I quit all. I was teaching at a music store, and I was teaching at I think 4 or 5 different schools. And I thought that's it. Can't do this anymore. At the time, I was very successful as a player. I'm still successful as a player, but I'm talking about getting gigs and stuff like that. So I really didn't need to teach. And I remember when I quit, I told people, I said, I'm tired, sick and tired of caring more about their progress than they do. I'm sick and tired of caring more about their progress than they do. So I quit for 7 years. During that 7 years, I did teach. I taught master classes. There were people from out of town. This was the most bizarre thing, right? Because this is this is why I still believe God loves me and takes care of me. I taught lessons to people who lived out of town and would travel to Houston. They want 4 hours of lessons. I give them 4 hours of lessons. And then I never have to deal with them again. And when I was burnt out, that was lovely. I still get to teach, which is what I like to do. I still get to teach, but I don't have to deal with the week to week to week to week. Um, and also during this time, the books were taking off, and I could teach that way too. So everything I'm sharing here includes the lessons, master classes, sectionals, the books, the compositions. All of this falls in that same category. When I quit, it was because that was too much of a burden to me. I could not continue. When I started back up 7 years later, now why did I start back up? I was terrified when my ex left me. I was terrified that I would not be able to make a living. It ended up not being that terror was unfounded, but it was a great excuse to get back into teaching again. So I started with a couple students. And from there, I added a school, and the only reason I added the school is because I got 15 students instantly, and that was only supposed to be temporary, and I wanted to just build my home studio, and that's what I did. And so let me tell you about the schools, by the way. I think they pay better now, but the pay back then was awful. I think I was making $7 a lesson when I first started. I think it got increased to $9 per lesson or maybe 16 at the end. I don't remember. All I remember is that it was terrible. Maybe 16 was for the whole hour. And you could say, well, $16 per hour. That's not how it works. You don't make $16 per hour. Yes, that's the hourly rate. But how much do you get to teach? Anyway, so my point is, when I came back, I made myself a promise. And this was one of the best decisions I ever made on the business side and the teaching side. I made myself a promise that I would not care more than they do. So how does that work as a business model? As a business model, what I decided to start doing was to help the student get where they want to go, not where I want them to go. Now, how is that different from the traditional? The traditional form of lessons, and you can correct me in the comments if you think I'm wrong about this, but the traditional form of lessons, according to my experience, is that the teacher is the master. And I've heard, I'm not an expert on this, I've heard the term Gnostic. being used in the context of people who know more than you do. This is a loose interpretation of how I've heard it. And that's how the music teacher, the traditional business model is. They're the expert, they're the master, and you go to them because of how good they are, how much knowledge they have, knowledge you couldn't possibly possess yourself. Sort of like a mystical, they're the only ones that have the information, you have to go to them. Now, one of the reasons why that business model doesn't really work today is because all of that information is available online for free. So if your business model for teaching is you have all the information, you have something that you're trying to sell that has no value. If your music business model is you have something other people don't have, good luck with that. And that's what those guys on Facebook and YouTube are trying to sell. Their secret formula. Well, I'm telling you, all of it's available for free online. And you just have to put a little bit of work into it. No, that's not what I'm selling you. My business model is not selling you the secret formula. My business model is not selling you a mystical, Gnostic entity that you can't possess anywhere else but with my lessons. That's not what I'm selling you. My business model is that you have goals and I'm going to help you reach those goals. That's how I prevent myself from carrying too much of your burden. Because with this business model, you do carry more than I do. Because it's your goal. So when I write the books, when I give the lessons, when I write the composition, it's not because I'm the master, I know stuff that you don't know, and you better do it my way. When I changed the business model to this, you know what? One of the most magnificent changes that came out of this is that my teaching got better. Because I had to get to know you. I had to get to know you. And not just the shallow stuff. I had to get to know what you want. I had to get to know where you want to go. I had to get to know where you are now. And it's not good enough for me to just give you an etude or a tune to work on or a transcription or a orchestral excerpt or a solo. It's not good enough for me to give that to you and have you as an assignment, and you come back and I say, nope, that's not right, fix it. And even if I show you how to fix it, that old traditional business model still has me in the driver's seat, not you. I hope that makes sense. So the way I teach, the way I write, is every single bit of it is to help you get where you want to go. That's why, for example, the One Range book. The One Range book was written in it's detailed, don't get me wrong, it's detailed, but it's also extremely vague. Why is it vague? I use hypotheticals and stuff like that. Why is it vague? Why is it hypothetical? Because you have to apply it to your own situation. What I hope that people get out of that book is that they read it, understand it, and apply that understanding to their own approach to the horn. Now, I understand that this approach, this business model, doesn't work for everybody. There are actually people, because you know what you're not going to get from me? What you're not going to get from me is, and you will get this from the other guys, I'm not going to motivate you. I'm not going to use the tricks of the trade to make you feel bad that you didn't do enough so that you practice more next week. You're not going to get that from me. I'm never going to tell you that hey, you let me down. You need to put more effort. What I will do that is close to that is if you tell me that you have a goal. Let's say, for example, this is a great example. Let's say you want to make Allstate. And we're 1/4 of the way into the Allstate season. We're 1/4 of the way into it, and you're only 1/10 of the process that it takes to make Allstate. I will tell you at that point, not as a guilt trip, not as a, you know what I mean? Not because I need you to do better, but because you're not reaching your goal. You're not going to reach the goal that you're paying me to help you reach at that point. Then you have to up your game. Not because I told you to, not because I gave you a guilt trip. Not because if you don't do this, you're not worth my time. None of that. The reason I tell you that is so that you can accomplish what you said you wanted to accomplish. If we need to adjust that afterwards, we can adjust that. I'm fine with that. And since we're talking about that, there's a lot of people that don't know what they want. So officially, when they come in, they'll say stuff like, Mr. Lewis, all I want to do is get better. Well, hey, that's great. You don't have to have a singularly focused objective. Just getting better on the horn is good enough for us to have pretty good lessons. I hope that makes sense. But yes, I understand that this doesn't work for some people because they feel like they need motivation from outside of themselves. Or, what else? There's people who have very, very lofty goals. And since the way my business model works, the motivation has to come from you internally. But because it is like that, there's a lot of people who doubt their own ability to get across the finish line. They doubt their own ability to make Allstate on their own motivation. And I can't help those people because with me, that has to come from you. Your drive, and this is almost contradictory to what I say. I tell you that the most ambitious students that I've ever had are the worst students. You guys have heard me say that before. It's not really that much of a contradiction. That kind of ambition is poisonous. So there is a middle ground between the two. That kind of ambition will prevent you from making Allstate. And then the if you don't have any ambition whatsoever, that'll also prevent you from making Allstate. And I don't want to make it sound like Allstate's the only thing that we do in the lessons. It's not like that. Most of my students today are adults. Okay? Most of my students are adults and they have very interesting objectives. Um, some of them just want to get better. Some of them say they want to work on their chops. Some of them want to learn how to play jazz. Some of them want to play high notes. Um, and we work on all that. So yeah, and all of this stuff, that's the business model. I tell people I'm a goal-oriented teacher, but not my goals for you. It's your goals for you. That's my business model. And I'm not saying this as a, well, first of all, let me say this. I'm not saying this as a put down to other people. I told you my story, the background about why I teach this way, because I want you to know why I teach like this. But also, I want to make it clear that this business model is for everything that I do, for the videos that I do. The videos that I put out follow this business model. I want to help you get where you want to go. I'm not some know-it-all that with information that you could never possess. And in fact, um, we have our sort of weekly Q&A where I share with you whatever information you want to have that's stored away in here. The information itself is, so I'm not saying it's of no value, but it's of much lower value than the work that we do um, helping you get where you want to go. I hope that makes sense. Anyway, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. It looks like I'm going to be making more videos now. I've adjusted to the dialysis schedule. And, sometimes life changes so much that you just have to push the reset button, right? And, yeah, so we're gonna start putting out some more teaching videos. It just can't be at the rate that it was before. Um, I just don't have that kind of time like I did before. What I do have time for is the stuff that I can do sitting in the chair. When I sit in the dialysis chair, I am working. At first, I did fall asleep a few times and stuff like that, and I'm not afraid to take a nap when I feel like I need it. Um, but as I'm sitting in that chair, I'm writing. I write. I respond to emails. I, stuff like that. I'm very, very active. I'm writing books. I am starting to do the composition stuff in the dialysis time, so that looks like that's starting to pick back up again. But anyway, so things are starting to work themselves out with that, with the scheduling stuff. I wish I could make videos while I'm sitting there, but that would be kind of weird. Especially the way I look. I have to, when I'm on dialysis, I have to dress like I'm going out into the snow because something happens to my body in there and I freeze. It's only 60 degrees. It's not really that cold. But something, maybe it's because of taking the fluid out or whatever, but I freeze my butt off. I have gloves on with the fingers, holes in the fingers so I can type. I've got a scarf around my neck, and a heavy, heavy coat, and I wear long johns. So um, that would be a very funny video to make for you guys. So anyway, I hope you understand what I'm saying about the business model and how it applies to the videos, how it applies to the books, and how it applies to the lessons and the compositions. I didn't go into the compositions much this time, but it does apply to the compositions. I don't, on the musical side, yes, I write the compositions for my own satisfaction. I say that um, because that's how Stravinsky worded it in um, his book, The Poetics of Music. He says, what does a composer seek? All he's looking for is to find his own satisfaction. So, yes, musically speaking, but in terms of where I put the limits in terms of range and what kind of rhythms I use and stuff like that, that's for you guys. If I wanted to write the with like what I would write for myself, it would have stuff that most of the young people wouldn't be able to play. So I'm not writing for me. I'm writing for them to play. I hope that makes sense. So I know that can be difficult to understand with because I'm writing. I say on the one hand I'm writing for my own pleasure, but that's the musical side of it. The other stuff I'm talking about is the skill level side. And as far as I'm concerned, you can be musical at every skill level. Musical in the compositions, musical in your performance of that stuff. Just because something's written for a beginner doesn't mean you can't make music playing that. Or for that matter, a beginner can play musically on beginner music. I always tell the beginners, you could play as well as a professional. You can play just as well as a professional, um, as long as it's within your skill level. Anyway, I've gone on a little bit too long. Thank you for checking out the video. Look for the new videos as they come. And other than that, God bless you. And we'll see you on the next video. Thank you.